Grace and peace, beloved of God, Apostle Cheryl Richardson here. I'm gonna wait a few minutes and start tagging. We welcome you to another broadcast of Shatter the Silence. I'm gonna start tagging folks. I pray that you've had a really good weekend and that this past week has been amazing and that this coming week that we're about to embark upon will be even more amazing. Praying for you. This has been an eventful year for many of us with lots of challenges and victories and some more challenges. And we've established new relationships in many cases and severed old ones out of necessity because they were toxic. And even that should be viewed as progress, right? Moving in the right direction. And so we're just grateful to the Lord for his faithfulness to us and for his loving kindness, for his tender mercies. And I certainly appreciate his long suffering with me for sure. But he wants us to succeed and he wants us to fulfill our purpose and our destiny. The thing that he's designed us for and shaped us for is the thing that we are best equipped to accomplish just naturally, because the things that we need to succeed in terms of our destiny are things that he has built into us. Amen. And so I am grateful to know that I have an actual purpose and that I'm not just here chilling, until he calls me home. So as I've stated, please share. You all know I'm not real good at remembering to say that. I'm getting better. And if someone wants to go ahead and try to capture a lot of the information that I'm going to share on today, that would be greatly appreciated. As I've said in previous broadcasts, if you have questions or comments, do chime in. You have an opinion, do chime in. Anything that you think may be beneficial or helpful or encouraging or uplifting for us as we look at the dynamics of domestic violence restraining orders, feel free. I probably won't be able to answer all of your questions while we are live. I'll do my best, but I promise, as I do every week, that I will go back in as soon as we're done and address any questions and comments. I certainly appreciate you joining us on today, and I appreciate you sharing and hosting a watch party on your own page, sharing to any groups or any individuals on Facebook or off that you feel may benefit from the information that we're sharing. Now, I want to issue a disclaimer. I am a clinician, a therapist by trade, a career mental health professional, and a military veteran. I am not an attorney. And so the information that we're going to talk about today, I'm sharing with you for informational purposes, okay? What I want you to do is to reach out to a domestic violence advocate in your area, or you can inbox me for more information. But I like to provide you with sources and resources that you can go to in your time when you're ready to seek help and support for your own personal situation, okay? So now I've tagged a bunch of you. If you will go ahead and tag some other folks, that would be greatly appreciated. And we're going to be talking about the dynamics of domestic violence restraining orders, okay? And I want to say that there are pros and cons to this. I become concerned when I hear advocates just advocate for one course of action without talking about the ramifications of embracing that choice or that decision, okay? And so for many of us, especially those of us who name the name of Christ, for those of us who, feel that we are religious people or spiritual people, there's a tendency sometimes, I think, to over-mystify things. And which really kind of absolves us of any responsibility for being decisive or executing our decisions. So I'm gonna continue to tag. I'm gonna stop tagging in here in a few seconds and rely on you all to continue tagging. Okay. But I think it's important that we look at all sides of a thing and not just one side of a thing. And it's very, very easy to begin to treat the Lord as though he's a genie and not God. And he's not a genie, and he's not in a lamp. And we don't rub the lamp and get our way because we rub the lamp or because we spin around 3 times and tell our neighbor God is able. That's not how this works. Okay. we have got to be actively involved in our own deliverance. Okay, so whatever it is that we need deliverance from, we've got to be prepared to participate in our own deliverance. Okay, and stop being so deep and mystical that we're getting destroyed and we're getting caught up. One of the things that is really weighing on my heart, because I feel that many people have this question, and I really want to address it at some point in the near future, is, if people are Christians and if they are believing God and they're going to church and they're active in their ministry, why are they getting killed at the hands of their abusers? And that's something that we really need to look at and we really need to talk about. And we need to not act like this is not the case, because it is often the case. You've heard me say in the past that domestic violence is an epidemic within the church, that the rate of domestic violence is greater within the church than outside of the church. And this should not be. But what makes this possible? What makes it possible? It's got to be our mindset. It's got to be the way that we approach it, or the way that we excuse ourselves from approaching it, okay? We know that sin and evil dwells in darkness. That's where it lives. It needs darkness to flourish. And so as long as we're refusing to look at these things, and as long as we're refusing to address these things, these issues are going to have a stranglehold on the Church of God. And this is not something that he's okay with. He's not okay with it. And so for those of us who are advocates regarding whatever the scourge is that is affecting the church and that is affecting society as a whole, whether it is domestic violence, whether it is human trafficking, whether it is child sexual assault, whatever it is, whatever the scourge is, it flourishes because of darkness, and it flourishes because we are not being assertive enough in terms of addressing it. Okay, so I'm going to try to wave to a few of you. We're going to get started talking about domestic violence restraining orders, because it is important. But it's important also to note that there are pros and cons. There are pros and cons. And for a victim, it's important that they feel empowered to make the decision that they believe is best for them. Hey, cousin Howard, yay. Hey, Aisha. So it's important that they feel empowered to make a decision that's best for them in their own time. And we can best respect that if we understand the dynamics. And for more about that, go back and look at some of the other 20 plus lives that we have done, because we've discussed like 22, 23 different topics now. We've been doing this for about 5 months. We've done it every week, no matter what is happening in our own life. We are mandated to do it, and so that's what we do, okay? So again, I'm Apostle Cheryl Richardson, and we're going to be talking about the dynamics of the DV restraining order. Now, if someone would type this in for me, hey Rosalind, I would greatly, greatly appreciate it. It's www.womenslaw.org. www.womenslaw.org. WOMENSLAW.org. Okay. And the reason that I want that typed in is because if you go to that site, you can select the state that you live in from the drop-down menu, and it will tell you about the restraining order laws in your particular state. Okay, I'm looking at the people who are on here, and we're all over the place. So it's important that you have a place that you can go so that you can get the specifics. What we're going to talk about is general information that tends to be true no matter what state you are in. But thank you, Roz. So go to that site when we're done. Hey, Christina, go to that site when we're done so that you're familiar with the laws in your state. And even if you're not a victim, it's important that you know what the laws are so that you know what to say to your friends and your loved ones when they find themselves in this situation. Okay? We know that 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men have experienced or will experience severe domestic violence. Not just domestic violence, but severe domestic violence, physical violence in their lifetime. Thanks, Ken. So it's important. You can go to that website and check the drop-down menu for your particular state, or the state that your loved one or person that you're providing support to resides in, so that they can understand what the laws say, how they're protected, where they may be vulnerable in their state, okay? Now, what is it that we need to know? That restraining order laws are state laws, and each state has its own set of laws, also called statutes, that address domestic violence, okay? And their statutes specify the criteria for getting an order of protection or restraining order in that state. Okay, so again, these laws are state specific. That's why that website is so important. They're state specific, and the criteria in one state for getting a restraining order may not be the same as in the state right next door. Okay, so it's important that you know, right? The Bible says we should be men in business. So we need to understand what laws affect us. Hey, Reed, what laws affect us where we live? Okay, and again, you don't have to be a victim for this to be important. Someone that you know has experienced this, or is experiencing it, or will experience it in the very near future. And you want to be able to provide them with information that is meaningful and that empowers them. Hey, Cassie. So, a restraining order is state specific. They may not be identical. States can be sitting right next to each other and they have completely different criteria for getting a restraining order, okay? You can't just go to court and say, hey, they looked at me cross-eyed, or they looked at me funny, and I want a restraining order. So there are criteria that have to be met, okay? And the laws are also called statutes, okay, in every state. Okay, it's a legal order issued by a state court which requires that one party stop harming another party. So a restraining order in your state may be called a protection order. It may be called an order of protection. It may be called an injunction, okay? But they are the same thing. So again, go to that website, www.womenslaw.org, so that you can know how it's referred to in your particular state. Hey, Vet. So the rules vary from state to state that require that allow you to get a restraining order in the event of domestic violence, okay? Now, there are two different types. There are civil restraining orders and there are criminal restraining orders. Why do we need to talk about this? So that you can know where you're protected and where you may be vulnerable, okay? What one allows you to do and what the other one does not allow you to do, okay? Pastor Shonda. Okay, so in DV situations, there may be both a civil and criminal order in place, okay? At the same time, because of a violent act in one incident. So it depends on the dynamic of the incident. It depends on what happened in the incident, okay? It really does, all right? Now, you may not want to pursue both civil. You may want to pursue both civil and criminal actions for maximum protection. So civil protection addresses more damages than anything. In a civil case, okay? In a civil DV action, you are asking the court to protect you from the person abusing you. You're not asking for jail time for their offense. Let me say that again. Hey, Keith, in a civil action, you're asking for the court to protect you, to cause them to stop harming you. But you're not asking for jail time. You're not asking for prison time because of what they've done. Okay? So if it's a civil action, we're not talking about jail time at all. We're talking about the judge saying, you need to stop doing this, this, and this. And these are the circumstances under which you may or may not interact with this person. Okay? Now, in the case of civil law, you are the one that's bringing the case. If it's a civil case, you're bringing the case against the abuser, okay? Now, if the abuser violates the civil court order, so let's say you go to civil court and the judge issues an order, right? A restraining order. If the abuser violates that, now they can go to jail, but you're not going in asking for jail time in a civil case, okay? In a civil case, you're the one bringing the case against the abuser most of the time. Okay, you have the right to withdraw or drop the case if you want to. Now, here's the rub. Oftentimes, a civil case will get dropped for many reasons. Because the abuser intimidates the victim. Because flying monkeys influence, right? People that the victim considered friends or that they had a meaningful relationship with who are influenced by the abuser or connected to the abuser or can't imagine that the abuser would ever mistreat you. And they're convinced that it must be a misunderstanding or that you must have done something. Hey, Prophet Gay, now you must have done something to cause this, okay? All flying monkeys. That's a whole nother discussion that we've done, okay? But we're going to revisit that because it's important. So the abuser may intimidate the victim. The victim may be influenced by people that they feel are their friends but are connected to the abuser. Okay, and let me digress for a moment. If they're connected to your abuser, you cannot trust anything that's coming out of their mouth because they have a vested interest in believing that the abuser is not guilty and that you must have had some role in all of the chaos. Okay, so you cannot rely on that. Don't do that. Don't do that. Okay. Now, when you want to talk about a criminal case, in a criminal case, okay, the system handles all cases that involve violations of criminal law. For example, assault, harassment, murder, theft. And then under this system, the abuser is charged with a crime. So the difference between civil and criminal is that in a civil case, hey, Pastor Lakita, in a civil case, the victim is bringing the charge, okay? And under the criminal case, the system itself, the prosecutor, the state's attorney, whatever it's called in your area, they are bringing the charge. The state is saying a crime has been committed and we are bringing a charge, okay? So the abuser is charged with a crime in that case. Now, in a criminal case, the prosecutor, may be called the district attorney, may be called the state's attorney, is the one who has control over whether the case continues against the abuser. In these cases, if the state brings a criminal charge against the abuser, the victim may say, "Oh, but I don't want them to be charged. Oh, but I hurt him. I hurt her. I loved it. They didn't mean it. They broke my eye socket, but they didn't mean it. They apologized. They were dropped on their head at birth." Whatever the reason is, because often abusers will hoover the victim to avoid a criminal case being prosecuted. They will hoover a victim, okay, in order to convince them that a civil case should be dropped. And oftentimes it's effective, especially in a civil case, because the victim is the one that's bringing the charge in the first place, right? And by law, they have a right to change their mind. In the case of a criminal case, there are times increasingly where the victim may fall victim to hoovering by the abuser. And hoovering is a term that's used to describe really the manipulation, the lies, the manipulation. It's all designed, promising you everything that they refused to give you before, whatever they need to say and whatever they need to do to get you to either not show up at court or to say that you want to drop the charges or to say that you lied or to say that you exaggerated, whatever it is, so that they can avoid a criminal case, okay? Now, increasingly what we're seeing is prosecutors aren't falling for this. The victim may say, "Well, I changed my mind and I don't want to go to court." And the victim may end up being subpoenaed to go to court to testify anyway, because a crime has been committed, especially if there are victims. If there are other ways that they can establish that this crime actually took place, medical records, eyewitnesses, whatever, okay, they may very well prosecute no matter how the victim feels. Now, in some cases, they may say, "Well, the victim's not willing to testify. We don't have a strong enough case without them, or we don't want to take them through that," and they may drop it. Okay, so I'm not on here saying to you, you absolutely must get a restraining order. There are things that you want to consider. And I will tell you this. If you don't make a police report, and if you don't attempt to get a restraining order, there's no real record that anything has happened. Okay? If you feel that you're not ready to leave an abusive situation for whatever reason, I'm not mad at you, for whatever reason, because it's all part of the process. The concern is that you live long enough to get out. And that when you do get out, you still have your right mind. Okay? That's the concern. That you not die, all right, just hang out in an abusive situation that is clearly unhealthy. Hey, Dr. Jen. So you want to consider the pros and cons, and for each and every individual is different. But if you don't try to get a restraining order, if you don't call the police and make a report, there's no record. So a week, 2 weeks, 2 minutes later, when it happens again, because it will, because it's a cycle, so it's going to happen, something's going to happen again, and 9 times out of 10 it's going to increase in acuity. It's going to be more serious than what happened the last time. When the police do respond, as far as they're concerned, this is the first time. It's not the 5th time. It's not the 6th time. And so the leverage that they can bring to bear on that situation is weakened. Their judgment concerning what they're observing when they come and have to make a call about what has happened in this home or what has happened in this situation. Who is the primary aggressor? We've talked about that in previous discussions, okay? They have to make a decision, and part of what's taken into consideration is, has this been reported in the past? Okay? Has this been reported in the past? You get a different response if this is the 10th time versus the 1st time. Okay? And so you really kind of handcuff the people who are set in place to help and support you when you don't assume responsibility for keeping yourself safe as well. Okay? Now, I'm not bashing victims. I'm just telling you the truth. I'm just telling you the truth, okay? We want you to live. We want you to live and understand that you have value, okay? We want you to live. It's best that people know. It's best that you document. It's best that you report. It's best that you tell. But we're going to talk about, because this is about the dynamics, right, of a restraining order. So we're going to talk about why it's important that you look at this thing in a balanced way. And it's a personal decision. It's something that you have to decide. But remember, if a crime has been committed, there's a real good chance you're not going to be able to influence what happens after that. Okay? And the abuser will have brought it on themselves. Okay? All right. So in a criminal case, it's the state or county who has filed the case against the abuser and not the victim, okay? And as I said, it is possible that the victim doesn't want to pursue it, and it's possible that the prosecutor or state attorney may acknowledge that, accept that, and it's possible that they may decide this is a serious enough case that we're going to be looking at a homicide if we don't do something about this. And they may very well not drop the case at all, okay? All right. Now, I mentioned to you about hoovering because it's important. It usually consists of, and it's named after the vacuum cleaner. You know how the vacuum cleaner, that was supposed to be the best vacuum cleaner on the market, and it would just suck up all the dirt and just suck everything out, right? That's what hoovering does, okay? In a hoovering instance, the abuser manipulates, sweet talks, threatens, coerces, whatever they have learned works best, with the end goal being, at the end of all of the candy and flowers and gold bracelets and the tennis bracelets and the let's go on vacation, at the end of all of that is, and we're not going to court, right? And you're going to drop the case, right? You're not going to pursue charges, right? Okay. Right? So there you go. So that's the whole point. The whole point is to avoid court. It's not about them loving you, caring about you. They would love not to go to jail. That's really what it's about. Okay. Now, what can you expect at the first court appearance? So let's say there's an incident, there's some physical aggression, the police are called, and the victim seeks a restraining order. Okay, now that's awesome, right? And that's admirable. But don't celebrate too soon, because there's several more steps that have to happen in order to make that meaningful. Okay, now, so the victim decides, I'm getting a restraining order, and that's good because maybe this is the 2nd or 3rd or 4th or 50th time that they've been abused, and they have never, hey Apostle Charlene, and they have never reported it. So it is a huge step that they have involved law enforcement, and it is a huge step that they have requested a restraining order. There's a difference between calling the police, that's one step, and requesting a restraining order. That's a completely different step. You can continue to just call the police, call the police, call the police. The problem with that is the next time they come around, the police don't have any more leverage than they had the first time. The restraining order will provide you with guidelines under which this person can be in contact with you, how close they can be to you, how many hundreds of feet, how many miles, whatever, that they can't, contact you on social media, that they can't contact your children or whatever. So it sets boundaries in place. Okay. Now, domestic violence is thriving because there aren't any boundaries in the relationship. The boundaries have been all crashed, right? And they're not being respected. The boundaries you thought you had are being completely ignored. You're not enforcing them. They're not acknowledging them. So there aren't any boundaries. A restraining order will put some boundaries around the situation and make it clear when the abuser is violating you, okay? Makes it clear in ways that the law recognizes. So it's one thing for you to call up 911, then make up, then have another fight, then call 911, then they come back, okay? Then you make up, then you call 911 again. You're just going in a circle, and there's no leverage. There's no leverage. The police don't have any leverage. You can call and make a complaint. If they show up and the person's not there, or if they show up and they don't see any evidence of what you're talking about, they're leaving. What are they supposed to do? Okay? But if there is a restraining order in place, okay, then now they've got some leverage. And now they know that maybe you're serious about extricating yourself from this situation. Hey, Barbara, my friend in Alaska. So one step is calling the police. And that's huge because oftentimes victims won't. But the next thing that needs to happen, though, in order for you to continue to progress, is to apply for a restraining order. If you don't, then law enforcement is limited in terms of what they can do when they do come out, because there's no boundary set. There's no boundary set. Okay. So what can you expect at the first court appearance? The first appearance may be ex parte, right? And that means that you'll see the judge, but the defendant will not be there. So you'll be in court if it's ex parte, and the abuser won't be in court. All right? Usually the judge will review the petition that you have filed, ask any questions deemed important, and decide whether to issue the ex parte temporary order. So the judge may order a temporary order when you first go to court for your first court hearing, even if the defendant is not there, based on the evidence in the petition. What evidence? I'm glad you asked. Okay. Any medical records you have, any recordings you may have of them threatening you, voicemail messages, screenshots from text messages, anything that's going to substantiate your case, witnesses, who has heard him or her threaten you, okay? Witness statements, like I said, medical records, anything that you have that's going to substantiate that this is actually happening. Hey, Takaria. Hey, Apostle Marquita. So you want to be able to substantiate. So for those of you who are in an abusive situation and you're not quite ready to do anything about it, the very least you can do is document what is happening. You can document when and where, what was said, what happened. You can do that, even if you're not ready to act on it, okay? And then I would suggest that you make sure that someone beside you has a copy of it. Somebody else needs to have this. So you can email it to an account that you have that the abuser knows nothing about, and copy someone else so that someone else has access to this information, okay? It's very, very, very important. So again, not trying to rush you into a step that you're not ready to take, but I think it's important that you understand the ramifications of taking action versus not taking action every single step of the way, okay? All right, so the judge will review the petition and he'll look at the evidence that you have provided, which is why it's important that you have been documenting what has occurred, what was said, what was done, were you injured, take pictures. It's easier now than it was years ago. I mean, you got a camera in your phone. A click of a button, you can send it to yourself, send it to an email account, and send it to someone else so that someone has it besides you in the event the abuser destroys your phone. Because at some point, they go for your devices, okay? All right. So the judge will review it. He'll make a determination about issuing a temporary order at that time or setting it for hearing, which means that you have to come back to court at another day, okay? What can be ordered? The abuser can be ordered to stop harassing, threatening, stalking, or abusing the victim. They can be ordered to relinquish all firearms. Now, not all states require this. I don't know why they don't, okay? Does that mean that they can't get another one? No, it doesn't, but they'd have to work at getting one, okay? They'd have to break some other laws to get one, okay? They can be ordered to stay away from the shared residence, but continue to pay mortgage, etc. Okay? They can be ordered to stay away from the victim and children. In some states, the abuser can be ordered out of the home, even if they are the owner or leaseholder, if the victim has lived there a certain amount of time. So again, go back to www.womenslaw.org and check the drop-down menu for your specific state or the state that your loved one resides in, so that you can know what the rules are, what the statutes say for your particular state. Okay? The judge can order that the victim get possession of the family car, pets, and other possessions. The judge can force the abuser to give you certain documents like immigration papers, children's birth certificates, the things that you need to get reestablished elsewhere. The judge can forbid the abuser from posting messages or photos of you on social media, reaching out, contacting you on any social media platform. And of course, if they violate that, that's easy. Screenshot it and save it. That's a violation, okay? Most states allow the judge to order temporary custody and child support. They can order that the abuser or the alleged abuser pay for damaged property, medical expenses, etc. Okay? Now, it may not be the easiest decision for a victim to make, depending on the circumstances. So I want to look at real quick some of the circumstances that might make it difficult for a victim to actually pursue a restraining order. Again, it's important that we're educated concerning the pros and cons, and stop over mystifying everything, and stop sprinkling fairy dust everywhere, because this is how people are getting killed. Okay? I'm not sure what we're expecting God to do when we won't avail ourselves of information and education. In Hosea, it declares that my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. And as you hear me say almost every single week, that's not a period there. There's a semicolon. So the thought is not complete when we stop there. I've heard entire messages, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. That is not all he said. He said it's because we have rejected knowledge. So it's not when we don't know that we find ourselves in the throes of destruction. It's when we have an opportunity to know, right? And we don't avail ourselves of it, or we have an opportunity to know. The information is relayed to us, and we choose not to employ it. We choose not to execute it. We choose not to apply it, okay? That's when we get destroyed. We don't get destroyed any other way, people. We do not get destroyed any other way. God loves us, all right? But we have to be involved in our own deliverance. We have to hold ourselves accountable for getting ourselves free, okay? To avail ourselves of the help that God has placed around us. This instance, domestic violence, 20, 30 years ago, there was hardly any help out there. You could call the police and they tell the abuser to go take a walk looking at your black eye. Just go cool down. Go have a drink. To walk around the block and then come back. That was it. That was the extent of the help. And forget a restraining order. Forget a restraining order. That certainly wasn't going to happen. Okay? So today there is so much more help available. There are people dying, men and women, and it's senseless because the help is out there. The help is out there, okay? But you can't sit in it and refuse to engage. You've got to reach out for help. There are many, many organizations out there, okay? I'm an advocate, stand-up survivor, against all odds. I mean, if you need some resources, inbox me. I'll provide you some resources. There's too much help out here to be dying in these situations, okay? Now, what might make it difficult for a victim to seek a restraining order? What are the things that need to be considered? Okay. Immigration status. So if your status here in the U.S. hinges upon you being in relationship with a U.S. citizen, that could be a problem. Because if that's the case and that relationship is fractured, now you don't have a right to be in the country anymore, right? The other thing that may happen is maybe you're not legal. Maybe you are an illegal alien for whatever reason. This applies to men and women. If you go to court, that's going to become known, and now you risk deportation to a set of circumstances that you may consider worse than what you're going through now. So these are all things that have to be considered, okay? And this is why it's a personal decision. But it's important that you know what the consequences are that are connected no matter what we decide, all right? The abuser may also file an order of protection to retaliate. And I've seen this countless times. Well, you know, he punched me in the face, and so I'm filing an order of protection. And then the abuser decides, well, she bit me or she pushed me, and so I'm filing one too. So then you get into all those shenanigans, right? So now you're getting accused of stuff that you didn't do, or you're getting accused of things that you did using resistive or reactive violence. That's something else that we've talked about in previous discussions in response to being abused in an attempt to get the abuse to stop, okay? So they may file an order of protection against you as well, all right? There's the increased risk of violence due to the impending separation or the breakdown of the relationship, okay? And it's important that you understand that a restraining order should not be the only safety mechanism that you have in place. I see Apostle Howard on here. He is a concealed carry firearms instructor. He's real big about safety or whatever. And I'd really be curious to hear what his thoughts are about this. I don't want you to get a false sense of security because you have a restraining order, okay? If you were dealing with a reasonable human being, you wouldn't need a restraining order. You could simply say, leave me alone, and they would listen. So, it's important that you understand that you're probably not dealing with a reasonable person, okay? There are some who have enough respect for the court and are serious about their own freedom enough that they're not going to do anything that's going to take them to jail. That's a boundary that they will respect. They might not like it, but they're not trying to go to jail. Okay? They're not trying to go to jail. That's going to cost them more than they're willing to pay. Okay? And so they may respect it. But then you have those who will be enraged by a restraining order. They will be enraged by a restraining order. Okay? This is the height of them not having control over the victim. This is the height of other people intervening in their business. And this could really just make things worse. And so it's imperative that you have a safety plan. Do not get a restraining order and think that's all you need to do. You've got to have a safety plan. You need a safety plan, and I try to say this every week. If you say, I'm in love with this person and I think that we can make it, you still need a safety plan. You need a safety plan to stay and live. Okay, you need a safety plan. If you're planning to leave in the next 10 minutes, you need a safety plan that's going to cover your exiting that residence. Okay, and what happens when you leave there. If you're already out, you need a safety plan. All right, you need a safety plan. That 30 to 90 days after that separation kicks in, you are at high risk of becoming a domestic violence homicide statistic. Okay, at the very least, you may suffer greater violence. Okay, because of the complete lack of control that the abuser is experiencing at that time. Okay, so you need a safety plan. If it's been 5, 6, 10 years, you need a safety plan. Why? Why do you say that? Well, you know, that was 5 years ago. Haven't heard anything from him or her. But what's going on in their life? What happens the next time they get rejected? There have been instances where abusers have gone on and established relationships with new people. That relationship fractured. They put them out. They went to court. And that joker circled back around and killed the last person he was with. Because he never got over the rage from losing control in that first relationship, okay? So it's not about what's going on in the victim's life. It's about what's going on in the abuser's life. What's going to push them over the edge, okay? So 30 to 90 days after, okay, is a high risk time. When you first get a restraining order, high risk, okay? And I'm going to read some statistics to you later. And we don't employ scare tactics. I'm all about what is the truth, okay? What is the truth so that we can make informed decisions about how best to proceed, okay? So it's an individual decision, and it's something that the victim has to think through because they've got to be able and willing to execute, to walk it out, no matter what they decide, okay? You've got to have a viable safety plan. Now, if you go to our blog, www.judasroar.com, and I'll put that up here in a few minutes when we're done, you will, if you subscribe to the blog, then you will be automatically emailed a template for a safety plan. Now, every single safety plan is not identical, but the idea is, I designed it and developed it to provoke thought process about different areas of your life that you need to consider how you can maintain your safety in, okay? Don't ever think that you have such, an amazing relationship with an abuser that you can trust what they say concerning not ever harming you again, because you just cannot. You can't. You cannot. If they respected you in the first place, they would not have mistreated you, okay? It's about power and control. It's about power and control. Listen to me. In the church, too, it's about power and control. I don't care how many titles this person has. I don't care how many bishops say that they're amazing. I don't care. If they're mistreating you, they're an abuser. They're an abuser with the endorsement of ministry leaders, which is a whole nother topic. Okay, I don't want to get started on that today. Okay. All right. Who qualifies for a protection order? The two parties must have a specific type of relationship. Okay. Number one, parties who were or are married. Okay. Number two, parties who were or are dating, including same-sex couples. Okay. Domestic violence is a tremendous issue even among same-sex couples. So no one is immune. We're all affected by it. Okay. And then number three, parties who have a child together. So there has to be some kind of specific relationships. Now, as I told you, the statutes vary from state to state, okay? Some states allow for parent, child, siblings, or people related by marriage. They consider those domestic relationships, even like a mother-in-law. And then some states allow for people who live in the same household. You don't have to have an intimate relationship with them, and you don't have to be related to them by blood, but you reside at the same home. You reside at the same address, okay? Some states allow for restraining orders if someone is stalking or harassing you. So again, it's important to know what the statute is in the state that you reside in. It's important that you have to live in the state or in order to file a protection order in that state. So most of the time, you have to reside in the state that you are forming that you're requesting the restraining order in. Why is that? Because the judge may not have jurisdiction over someone in another state. Okay? These are state laws and state statutes. Why am I bringing that up? Because in this day and age, there is so much online dating, online relationships where one party lives in one state and another party lives in another state, and I'm going to visit you this week and you're going to visit me next week. If something happens, if some domestic violence occurs, where did it occur? Because if you don't live where it occurred, you may be at a disadvantage in terms of getting a restraining order. Okay? It's going to be difficult for you to go to your home state and request a restraining order against someone who does not reside in the same state that you reside in. So that's why I bring that up. Only because the prevalence of dating across state lines is so huge right now. Okay? All right. What abusive behavior qualifies for a protection order? Each state and territory identifies within its laws the criteria for the issuing of a protective order, an order of protection, a restraining order. It may be called different things in different states. But the statute defines clearly what must be included in order for a victim to be eligible to get a restraining order, okay? Some states allow for non-physical acts, harassment, threats to harm a pet, threats to harm a loved one, okay? But, I mean, in those cases, you got to be able to quantify that these things has happened. So if you have a witness or you have a screenshot or a voicemail, something that quantifies that these things have actually occurred, okay? You want to write the incidents down with as much detail as possible, even if you feel that you're not ready to try to go get a restraining order. You want to be able to show how the abuse has heightened and built upon itself over time. You want to be able to show what the pattern is to the judge. Because remember now, when you go to court, they're going to determine whether to issue a temporary order waiting for a court date or not. And if you leave without one, then you're leaving and you don't have a temporary order of protection. And it's probably because you've not been able to substantiate that the abuse has occurred, okay? So gather the evidence to support your claim. As I said before, medical records, pictures, screenshots of text messages, emails, witness testimony, because they can be subpoenaed to testify in court as well. If you have any torn clothing, damaged property, take pictures of those things. The good thing about pictures now, especially if you take it with your phone, is a date time stamp. So it will be clear when these things occurred, okay? Most states won't issue an order of protection solely on the grounds of psychological or emotional abuse unless the abuse occurred while a crime was being committed. For example, stalking or harassment. Because stalking is against the law, okay? In all the states. It's against the law. It's illegal, okay? Hey, Latricia. Prophet Kimberly, hey. Some states do have a statute of limitations. What do I mean by that? For example, if I am the victim of domestic violence and I wait a year to report it, the state may say, we're not doing anything about that. Either you have re-entered a relationship with this person, or there's no contact, therefore there's no need for a restraining order. You understand what I'm saying? So again, it's important that you know what the statutes are in your particular state. Okay. There are 3 possible outcomes after the judge reads your petition for an order of protection. So there are 3 things that can happen. Okay. Once you become a victim, you've called the police, you have reached out to a DV advocate or an attorney, you have gone to a DV shelter and they've advised you about getting a restraining order. You have completed the petition and you have submitted it to the court. There are 3 positions that the judge can take. Number 1, if the judge believes you are in immediate danger, they may issue an ex parte TPO. Okay, that's an ex parte. Remember, I said ex parte means that the abuser is not in court. But if they read the petition and they look at the evidence that you have provided and they come to the conclusion that you are in immediate danger, like if we don't issue this order, something bad's going to happen, more likely than not, okay? Then they can issue the order even though the abuser is not in court. And then the judge will decide to set a date for a hearing for a final order, okay? The victim will need to convince the judge that they were abused, which is why all the evidence is important and witness statements are important, okay? And the abuser may be there to defend themselves at the court hearing. So that's something that you have to prepare mentally for. And that's a good time really to make sure that you're connected to a DV advocate, someone that can go with you so that you're not in court by yourself, okay? Number 2, if the judge does not believe that you are in immediate danger, but believes that you may be able to prove the abuse at a hearing, the judge may deny the temporary ex parte order, okay, and schedule the case for a final hearing, okay? Now, the victim, again, will need to convince the judge that the abuse has taken place and the abuser can be present to defend themselves, okay? Number 3, if the judge believes that the acts reported do not qualify the victim for a protection order, it may be denied altogether. Now, sadly, there have been cases where it's been denied, and then a homicide occurred later. And I don't know if it's because maybe there wasn't enough evidence in the petition. I don't know. But there are instances where you go to court and it's denied and the abuser continues to ramp up their abuse, okay, and their aggression. Now, okay, here are some facts that I want to share with you that I find very, very sobering. And these are from the Family Justice Center, okay? 1 out of 5 homicide victims with restraining orders are murdered within 2 days of obtaining the order. 1 out of 5 homicide victims with restraining orders. This means that they've called the police after an abusive episode. They have taken the next step, which is huge, and petitioned the court for a restraining order. The judge read their evidence. looked at their medical records or whatever, and determined that they were in immediate danger and provided them with an order of protection, or they didn't give them one initially. They came back to court. They were able to convince the judge and to provide evidence, right, that they were being abused. They got the restraining order, which, let me tell you, is not a walk in the park. You've got to convince a whole human being that has nothing to do with you that you're in danger. And you've got to be able to prove it. It can't just be that you're saying it, okay? So these are tremendous steps for a victim to take. But then 1 out of 5 homicide victims with restraining orders are murdered within 2 days of obtaining the order. What did I tell you? That 30 to 90 day window, you're at a heightened risk of becoming a homicide statistic, okay? Here's another stat for you. 1/3 of homicide victims with restraining orders are murdered within 1 month. So if they don't fall into the category of the 1 out of 5 who are murdered within 2 days, within 1 month, 1/3 of them are murdered, okay? A woman is 70 times more likely to be murdered in the few weeks after leaving her abuser than any other time. I try to share that every time that I'm on because it's important. It's also important to know that men are victims too. But most of the cases that are reported are with women being victims and men being perpetrators, okay? So that 30 to 90 day window is critical. It's critical, okay? Now, again, safety planning is vitally important. And someone besides you needs to be involved in the planning because you're not thinking of everything. You are traumatized. Your brain has been rewired because of the trauma. You're not thinking clearly. You are anxious. You are scared. You are sleep deprived. And someone else, a DV advocate, someone outside of your situation needs to be able to look at your plan and tell you where the holes are. Now, there was a case that happened just a few days ago. A woman named Tiffany Hill, and I believe it was in Illinois, had a domestic violence incident with her husband. She called the police, got a restraining order. He bailed out of jail. Okay, he bailed out. He was out on bail from a previous situation. Went to the children's school. She was there with her mother, so she wasn't traveling alone, okay? She was at the children's school with her mother. The 3 elementary age school kids were in the back seat of the car. He shot and killed her, shot her mother 3 times, and then led the police on a brief chase before stepping out of the vehicle and killing himself. She had a restraining order, but she was at the kid's school, and he knows where that is. A viable safety plan may involve you leaving the area. It may involve you changing your job. It may involve the kids being withdrawn from school, okay? You cannot just live your life the way you always live your life, go to all the same places that you've always gone, hang out the same places, take the same route to and from work, to and from school, and think that they don't know how to find you. So this is why it's important when we talk about safety planning that it's a viable plan, a doable plan, and this is why you need to start planning as soon as possible because some of this stuff takes time to work out. Where are the kids going to go to school if I have to withdraw them? How am I going to make sure that they're safe while they're in school? How am I going to ensure? Someone being with you does not stop a person who is off their rocker. They are enraged. They're not accepting any responsibility for any of it. And how dare you leave them? And you and whoever's helping you now are targets. Okay? You and whoever's helping you now are targets. 20% of DV-related homicides aren't even the victim. They are first responders. They are friends and family members. They are those who have stepped up to help. They are innocent bystanders. Okay? 20% of homicides related to domestic violence are not even the victim. Not even the victim. Okay? Hey, Ty. Hey, Lynn. So it's important that we be educated, okay? And stop mystifying everything. You're not going to be able to just sprinkle oil on your head and turn around 3 times and tell your neighbor God is good and think that's going to help you. It's not. We've got to get educated, okay? Please, 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 please. And so if you make a decision to stay, let it be an educated decision. do some safety planning while you're in there, okay? Now, again, I'm not an attorney. I am a clinician and a military veteran by trade. So this information has been shared with you for educational purposes, but it's important that you understand that the restraining order, there's nothing magical about it. Okay, you're going to draw fire when you get one. You're going to draw fire because that's a clear message to the abuser. I'm involving other people. I don't want anything to do with you. And this, for an abuser, this is challenging their right they feel they have over you for power and control. Okay, for power and control. All right. Let me share this one more thing. Because we're going through that season of the year where nobody wants to be alone. Everybody wants to be with somebody. And so a lot of times folks end up being with folk that they wouldn't be with otherwise. If it wasn't the holidays, they wouldn't have nothing to do with them. Okay? Their loneliness is affecting their judgment. Okay? Here's the thing. I've heard of instances where in 2 or 3 weeks the abuse pops to the surface. In 2 or 3 months the abuse pops to the surface. Okay? And I've heard of situations where they were a perfect angel until about 2 years. About 2 years. Then they flip out. That's about the longest I've heard people go. Okay? So understand that domestic violence is real. It is a silent epidemic within the church. According to the United Nations, they released a report in 2017 that said that the most dangerous place for a woman is in her own home. This is worldwide. So globally, it's an epidemic. Globally, it's an epidemic, okay? The Bible declares that the Lord's people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge because they rejected knowledge. Not because they don't have it, but because they have an opportunity to obtain it, and they choose not to, okay? So know that, understand that. And for those of you who are saying, well, why would God send this person into my life? He did not send them. They showed up and you didn't send them back. That's what happened. God didn't send them. I don't care who endorsed them, okay? I don't care how many collars they wear, how many titles they have. I don't care how long they've been preaching. I don't care if they got a storefront with 5 members or they got a church with 50,000 members, okay? All right? If the Spirit of God lives on the inside of them, they are not abusing and dogging you. They are not doing that. God's not living in there if they're acting like that, okay? And if you're acting like that, he's not living in you either, all right? So know that. His character does not change, okay? And if you read in Malachi, all right, the Lord declares that the people who mistreat their partners, their spouses, that the Spirit of God does not live in them, nor did it. The Spirit of God does not live in them. So let's stop trying to put folk in heaven that are heading in another direction. All right? If you are in a domestic violence situation, God didn't have nothing to do with that. He did not need to send you through that. If he needed to do that, he didn't need to go to the cross. He could just let us go through stuff, right? But he went through the cross so that we could have an abundant life. If it's not abundant, then you're living beneath his privilege. If you don't have peace, then you're living beneath your privilege. All right? And the price has already been paid. The price has already been paid. Okay? So let's hold ourselves accountable. Let's pull our head out of the sand. Let's stop being deep and mystical and sprinkling fairy dust and rubbing folk down in oil and not doing anything from a practical standpoint to get folk free. All right? All right? If you are one who has someone who's come to you and said that they're being abused from a domestic violence situation under those circumstances, and if your response is, well, what did you do to get them upset? Or your response is, well, just pray, just fast and pray. Turn your plate down and pray. You are part of the problem. All right? I said what I said. This is Apostle Cheryl L. Richardson. I encourage you to go to www.womenslaw.org. Check out the drop-down menu for the state where you live so that you know what the statutes are in your state or in the state where your loved one resides that lets them know what qualifications have to be met in order for them to get a restraining order. And again, if you're not ready to leave and you still have hope that things can work out, that's your choice, okay? I submit to you that you not fall into that place in Hosea where you're rejecting knowledge, okay? Apply what you've learned. Apply what I'm saying to you, okay? Please, 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 please. I don't want you to be a hashtag. I don't. I mean, it wears me out. It wears me out. The sheer number of people who are losing their lives, the generations to come that are being negatively impacted because they have experienced this trauma is just too much. It's too much. And this is not how God would have us to live. It's not. It is not. If you serve him or not, he does not want this for you. He does not want this for you. Okay? He has an amazing plan for your life. He wants you to live an abundant, fruitful, productive life. Amen? So we thank you for tuning in. We'll be back next week with another episode, another broadcast of Shatter the Silence. And we ask that you would just keep us in prayer as the vision for ministry continually expands. We're listening for guidance and doing our level best to obey God in his timing and to execute what he tells us to execute. When he gave us this topic about restraining orders, he gave it to us right after we finished last week's discussion. And then the very next day, that situation happened where this woman had the restraining order and her abuser killed her, wounded her mother in front of the 3 children. They were all in the car at the kids' school. And so, it's important to us to be sensitive to the Spirit of God and to listen so that we can try to stay ahead of what the enemy is doing, okay? And so I want you to know that we don't have a pre-planned list of this is what we're going to talk about on the first, Sunday, and the second Sunday, and the third Sunday, and then on the fourth. That's not how this works, okay? We stay on our face. We listen for guidance. We discuss what the Lord tells us to discuss at that time, with the belief that someone will hear what is being said that needs it in order to stay alive at that time. Amen. And so we love you. God bless. Please share, do a watch party. You can share it on all your social media platforms. That is completely fine. If you feel led to sow, it would be greatly appreciated. The things that he's given us to do are not free. And we are certainly willing to do them, and we're trusting him for provision. But I can't do it without you, and I certainly won't even try without him. Amen. This is Apostle Cheryl L. Richardson. We love you much. Inbox us if we can help you. Please share this broadcast, and we'll be back next week. Blessings to you.